Hello. As a huge fan of tabletop RPGs and medieval Japanese fantasy, I'm always on the lookout for exciting and interesting explorations that draw inspiration from those kinds of worlds. And at my recent visit to the UK Games Expo, I came across such a game, one that grabbed me instantly and got me very intrigued. It was called Ronin from Slightly Reckless Games. This high-energy samurai RPG has incredible aesthetics, inspired by and built on a foundation of the Mork Borg RPG. After chatting with the chaps behind this awesome game at the convention, I was keen to get an interview so that I could explore a few of the inspirations behind it, the business of publishing an RPG from scratch, and where this exciting new RPG company might go next. I'm Jordan, this is Jordan Sorcery, and today I'm in conversation with Ronin creator and writer Sacha Lightfoot. Sacha, thank you for joining me. I'm always keen to hear people's stories about how they got started in the general hobby. So, like, what was your journey into tabletop gaming in the first place?
It's kind of nice actually. It kind of came full circle at the UK Games Expo, but probably like over 10 years ago now, 12 years ago maybe. Um, just one of our friends who we kind of knew at the time was like, "Oh, we might play Dungeons and Dragons tonight. Do you want to come and play?" And like, I didn't know. I'd heard of it obviously, but I didn't really know what it was. And like, I thought it was like a board game or, something you played with like miniatures, and didn't really have kind of like any insight going into it. But I still remember like everything that happened in that first session. I remember my character. I remember like how much of a laugh, and like the DM didn't really like know the rules properly and stuff. So it was a bit chaotic, but we ended up playing that kind of campaign for a couple of years. And by that point, I think there was like six of us, like a few more people joined, some people left. And then one of the people who was playing, another one of our friends, was like, "Oh, I might have a go at DMing." And then he like read the books back to front. He's still like, I ask him about rules for games that he probably hasn't even read, just because he's like the go-to rules guy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the group we kind of made off the back of that was the four of us who were involved with Slightly Reckless Games. We played the D&D campaign for like 6 years, I think, up till kind of pre-COVID maybe. And it was kind of like, I think, I assume a lot of people's stories are the same. Dungeons and Dragons is kind of like, it's the gateway drug, in it. But during COVID, we were obviously managing to play online, and we were playing a couple of times a week because there was nothing else to do. But at that point, I'd started to kind of read and look at other TTRPGs and that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that became D&D once a week, and then I would DM Cyberpunk 2020. This was before 2077 and Red and all the kind of things that came after that. So playing a system from the 80s was a bit of a shock. And the kind of nature of it just being like, these are the rules, we're not covering everything, you've just got to kind of figure out stuff on your own. That was where I kind of started to dip my toe into, okay, let's homebrew this and let's change this. And then another lad in the group decided, all right, let's play Call of Cthulhu, I'm going to DM that. And then that kind of just turned into, we would all have a go at DMing for a few months at a time, and kind of play a bunch of different systems. And it kind of just evolved from there to the point where, we still, with that same group, we still play every week. We'll be playing tonight. I'm running some Mutant Year Zero at the moment, just to kind of, Fallout TV show came out recently, so we were all in a bit of a post-apocalyptic mindset. So I think like the way you got into it was through that one friend who then came and helped us out at the UK Games Expo, which is why it came full circle.
Right.
He works on films and stuff now, but he just came to help out, and he was great. But yeah, that's kind of like our journey to where we are now.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, it sounds like then, so over the last decade or so, you've hit a lot of the classics and gone through some of the big names in the sort of RPG space, and a lot of the sort of mainstream titles, I guess you'd say, for some of that. Have you sort of then branched out? I mean, how did you then get into the indie space?
Absolutely. So it was a few years ago, probably like 4 years ago now, when I kind of started exploring and reading more kind of systems, and then I started to discover kind of like the indie scene and like different. It was it was great. It was really eye-opening because it's like, you've got your D&D, which was the gateway, and then you've got your mainstream titles, which are kind of what you could do next, and then once you get into the indie scene, you go, fucking hell, there's like there's something for everything. You can play like there's a solo RPG where you can play as a horse if you want. um, so I kind of like just went down that rabbit hole and like
Hmm.
just kept going and going and going. And that was when I kind of discovered Free League, the kind of stuff they were doing with like Alien, which we played, and Blade Runner, which came out more recently, which I thought was amazing. I'm a big fan of like that genre of films and stuff. So once I kind of got onto Free League, that was when I discovered Mork Borg. And I remember the first time I saw Mork Borg, I was like, no, that's not for me. And it looks like it's in a different language as well, so I probably can't read it. And then it kept showing up on like recommended, or people would like talk to me about it. And I was like, all right, yeah, go on, I'll give it a go. So I bought it, and then I had like, I think I read it in a night, and I was just blown away by like the visual style
Hmm.
and the kind of the way it was written as well. I know a lot of people focus on kind of the layout and design and the artwork and stuff, but Pele's done like a really good job of kind of building that setting, and the tones kind of the same and consistent the whole way through. It really transports you to like Galgenbeck. Um, so after I read that in like an evening, it was like I bought everything Mork Borg that I could get my hands on, because it was like this game is like it seems perfect for our group, because it's kind of rules light in the sense of like there's still a good game there, but it's not
Hmm.
you're not crunchy. You're not like searching through a rule book trying to figure out what happens if this happens. You just kind of go with the flow, and it it created a lot of scenarios that was hilarious. Like it was weird being at UK Games Expo and people telling me they played Ronin and like kind of telling me similar stories that we'd kind of had in Mork Borg, where someone's using a snake as a whip, or like someone's throwing the dog to attack someone. So that's the kind of sessions we enjoy. So it was kind of a no-brainer. Once I'd seen that, I started having ideas.
Right. I mean, you mentioned there a bit of the sort of, the crunch versus maybe the feel of a
Yeah.
game, the vibes. I mean, where do you sort of fall on that spectrum from a player perspective?
If I'm playing, I kind of don't mind a little bit of crunch,
Hmm.
because I think as a player, when I'm playing a character, I like to come up with kind of out of the box solutions, which, sometimes the rules do allow for. Um, but GMing, I do kind of like to focus more on the role play side of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, I think it just comes down to like in both senses, as a GM or a player, I'm just kind of interested in the characters and the kind of narrative that we're building, and the rules are kind of like to assist that for me, especially when I'm GMing. But yeah, I don't mind a bit of crunch when I'm playing. There's kind of projects we're working on that are certainly a little bit more crunchy than Mork Borg and that kind of stuff. So I think
Hmm.
both have their kind of places. It just depends what you're in the mood for.
Sure. And you mentioned a
Mm.
bit about some of those cinematic games, the ones so your Blade Runners and things like that. Is that
Mm.
kind of so? I know in my games I like to bring in a lot of almost cinema, that kind of storytelling, right? It's very much for me about that vibes and the kind of the story that we're collectively telling together. Do you
Mm.
find that cinema and movies and all that sort of stuff plays a role in the games that you play?
100%, yeah. Not even just that, kind of music, books, all that kind of stuff, but certainly like my background's in video. Same with Dom. So like I say, we run a video production company, so kind of imagining stuff in a visual manner is kind of informed by that kind of encyclopedic. And I don't want to blow my own trumpet too much, but I know a lot about films. I've watched like so many, like thousands of films. Um, so yeah, like almost like when I started doing homebrew stuff, because whenever I DM'd over the years, it was always like I didn't use like campaign books or anything. It was like I'm going to build the world
Mm.
and kind of the dungeons and the story and the setting and whatever. And that was heavily informed by whatever I was kind of watching or enjoying at the time, even to the point where, like I said before, we're playing Mutant Year Zero at the moment, Fallout. I've been playing that again because of the TV show, and there's a lot of kind of influences drawn from whatever's going on at that point, and that's the kind of way I approached writing Ronin at the same time. It was while I didn't have like loads of free time, any free time I did have was playing games like Ghost of Tsushima or watching Kurosawa films or reading books and kind of just immersing myself in the genre so that whatever kind of came out on the page was as authentic as possible.
Right. Well, let's talk
Yeah.
about that. Yeah. So how did you go from just playing games and DMing games and stuff like that to then designing your own game? Like, what was that journey?
Um, it was quite an organic one, to be honest. As I've said there, it was kind of like I was always writing my own stuff, and even the stuff I was just kind of writing for myself as a DM that no one else would kind of see on a page was still designed nice and it looked nice and stuff. So I was always taking care to kind of have the visual aspect down, but it was sort of formatted in your classic RPG where you text and it's kind of laid out okay. But
Hmm.
it was when I saw Mork Borg that I kind of went, oh, like TTRPGs don't have to be laid out and I, not and Mork Borg's not without his faults. A few people said to me when I was making Ronin, like, can you just like not have everything kind of in different places? Can you have it a bit more sequential? And I was like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. There's a kind of line to be drawn. But yeah, so after I kind of saw what Mork Borg was doing, I was like, I started to picture in my head this kind of. It was weird actually. The first idea I had was for Norse mythology, which we've ended up doing second.
Hmm.
But the second idea I had was for samurai, and that was the one that kind of like I was having the most ideas for. And when I was writing stuff, I could just kind of started with the setting itself, and then started to think about what mechanics could be built for that setting that would use, the Mork Borg engine, but would kind of fit that system. So that's where we came up with like honor and resurrection and kind of like, and even down to the haiku and meditation and seppuku, and that was kind of a a difficult line to kind of tread with seppuku. That's why we had a sensitivity reader on the project that she was the one who was like, actually, they have a second, so you need someone to chop their head off if the seppuku fails. And I was like, all right, yeah. She didn't seem to kind of have too much of an issue with seppuku in itself, but yeah, like the kind of journey itself was kind of organic. Like I say, it kind of. I'd always been writing my own stuff and laying it out nice, and then it wasn't too much of a jump to kind of, especially when you're working on a system that's pre-existing. I'm kind of working on projects in the background where I'm building my own engine and stuff like that now. But you've kind of got the guidelines there for you within the rule set, so you kind of your hands held a little bit when you're making it. So that was definitely a bonus.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, because was it always going to be a Mork Borg? Like you were locked in on that as an engine to build from and a sort of almost a some of that aesthetic, or
Yeah.
was there a kind of discussion around, okay, let's just start from scratch, or did you want to ease in, I suppose?
There wasn't really much of a discussion. It was kind of like I'd seen the art style, which blew me away, and the writing as well, and then the engine itself. After playing it a good bunch, it just seemed flexible enough that you can kind of put your own stamp on it without kind of like breaking things too much. But with the new project with Berserkr, I am kind of pushing it a little bit further and seeing how much we can do that is separate from the Mork Borg engine and kind of build on top of it and kind of like I think like making Ronin was a good first point. Not to say that, I mean, Berserkr I hope will be as good if not better. But that kind of like now that I've got the experience of doing one, I kind of know a little bit more about what I can and can't do and the way it's going to go and stuff. So I don't know if this will be our kind of last one built on the Mork Borg engine, but it'll certainly be the next one won't be built on the Mork Borg engine. It'll be our own.
Right, sure, yeah. I mean, you know, the sort of the you mentioned a couple of games and films and books and stuff there as well, just about those influencing the kind of building of the world, and then that's what the game Ronin emerged from.
Yeah.
What were your sources? So what were you sort of referring to? What was informing that kind of creation of this world?
uh, everything and anything samurai, man. Like if I've probably seen or read or looked at artwork of it, if you can imagine it, or if you can remember it. Kurosawa films, obviously, that was like the kind of core. But not, it wasn't just kind of samurai stuff like Ghost of Tsushima, the Neo games, Sekiro, other films like kind of more modern like Zatoichi. I've been studying Japanese since October now as well, so like that was kind of something that was a byproduct that I've gone headfirst into, which has been great. But yeah, not just kind of samurai stuff. It was kind of influenced by other stuff as well. Like I mentioned Berserk before, that was a big influence. The kind of eclipse is quite a big motif for Berserk, and I kind of was drawn to that, and that was kind of the beginning of the world building in itself, this endless eclipse, which is, it's on the cover of the book and stuff like that. So yeah, it wasn't just kind of samurai stuff. There was other influences as well, but I think when you're kind of doing that research immersion kind of phase of things, it's difficult not to kind of for it to just come naturally. You know what I mean? If you're everything you're doing is like involved with samurais or something similar, then it just comes out naturally on the page and stuff.
Yeah. How do you
Yeah.
avoid sort of, because obviously you want to draw that inspiration and you might do homages and you might be like referencing stuff, but like when you're looking at so much cool stuff, how do you like distill it then into something new, I suppose? Like how do you make it your own?
I don't think it's something I'd be too conscious about, if that makes sense, because it's like I think as long as from my point of view, like I can watch a film or listen to a song and go that that's influenced by this person or the cinematographer or what have you. But I can also watch a film or listen to a song and go that's almost like parody-esque. It's almost like too close. Um, so I think like being able to recognize that in the first place is a good place to start, because it's hard to I don't find it too difficult to be objective with my work. I'm not kind of like precious about it, and I don't mind showing people, and I'll be the first person to go that shit, throw it out, do it again. And so I was never kind of worried or felt like I was any kind of danger of being too you know being too close to the influences that I was kind of garnering from. It was more of the way I approach it. It's the same when we make a video and stuff, like during the research phase. I approach it in a sense of like I'm going to gobble up all this stuff and regurgitate the combination of everything, and
Right.
and that seems to that mix seems to create something that is kind of fresh and new, but still kind of not so close that you would go, well, he's just ripping that off. You know what I mean?
I mean, that research stage then, what is it like? Is that just literally, right, I'm going to grab all of these books, I've got a long list of things to read, a long list of things to watch? Or like, is there any more structure to that as a process? Or
Not for me, no. I have kind of touch points in my brain of stuff that I already know that I would probably revisit, and then but I'd do just do a load of research based on books, or I'm reading like a book on runes at the minute for the Norse one, and one about like mythology and kind of stories from based on poetic and prose edda. But yeah, I just kind of make a list of kind of stuff that I've either heard of or know about already, and just do as much as I can in terms of like getting that information inside of me,
sure,
if that makes sense.
sure. I mean, you mentioned a having a sensitivity reader, obviously, because there's some like graphic elements and some sort of like, well, some difficult topics, I suppose, within Ronin. I mean, do you have to also consider, because obviously you're exploring different cultures, Norse and sort of Japanese cultures. Are you doing anything to sort of make sure that you're handling that sort of thing sensitively as well?
Absolutely, yeah. It's that was one of the most important things going into Ronin, and it's again one of the most important things going into Berserkr. For me, like I don't want to just take someone's culture and like butcher it for a game. You know what I mean? It's everything. When I got the first notes back from the sensitivity reader for Ronin, she was like, "This is clearly a love letter to Japan. There's just some stuff culturally that you wouldn't be aware of that we need to kind of have a look at and change."
Right.
And I was like, yeah, no, absolutely, like that's what you're on board for. So yeah, like being respectful of the culture and kind of handling it with care was certainly like at the forefront of my mind when we were making it. It's it was a difficult line to tread with in terms of like it is based on Mork Borg. It is going to be violent. It is going to be kind of like bloody and that kind of stuff. But I didn't want it to be like too gratuitous and kind of like, especially in terms of navigating kind of like the kind of cultural system at the time that it's set in terms of like, you know, women and kind of like that kind of stuff. You don't want to be too. There's a time for like respecting the culture, and there's a time for kind of updating it for modern standards. You know what I
Right.
mean? We don't need like geishas and being kind of like serving and like, you know, women are allowed to be samurai and stuff like that. That, you know, I think it's on the first page of the book that's like, you know, if you hold any of these kind of like views that are antithesis to slightly reckless games, then, you know, put the book down and fuck off. It's not for you, it's for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, what was then the actual like the process? I mean, I've always loved the idea of creating an RPG, but it seems like a daunting task, right? There's a lot to do in order to actually physically get to that point of having one in your hands. What
Yeah.
was the process like to go from, right, I've researched it, I know I want to do it, I've got all these ideas, to then actually being like able to publish it?
It was a long road. It was also a high opening journey, especially when we got into kind of like the back half. But the early phase was good. I had a little bit of time on my hands due to some like circumstances changing. Business was still quite busy, but I had quite a bit more time on than I'd usually have. And that was when I kind of started fiddling around with the ideas, and I started writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And I think I'd been writing for like 3 or 4 months before I'd even told anyone or mentioned it. And then I started to tell people, and then me and Dom kind of put a couple of spreads together of what it might look like. And then I posted it on Reddit, and people seemed to like it, so it was that kind of gave us the drive to kind of continue. And that was the only marketing we did for it. I'll be honest. I just posted a few spreads on Reddit and went, "Yeah, this is what we're making," and people were like, "Yeah, that's cool. I'll probably back that." And then it kind of blew up. But in terms of like the non-writing stuff, it was the design process. Dom, you know, he could talk more about it than me, but in terms of like I'd already researched artists and kind of had a list of people that I knew I wanted to work with, and it's kind of one of the first things I've done for Berserkr as well, is kind of like look at artists that I'm aware of, or, you know, they might have made Magic the Gathering cards, or, you know, done other kind of similar stuff, but I kind of get a list of names together, and I'll be honest, like that kind of side of stuff for Ronin was really simple. Like everyone just said yes straight away. It wasn't like there was a I think there was like maybe 2 people who was like, no, I'm too busy, or I'm doing something else, but everyone else was like, yes, project sounds great. And you know, with my background in video, we kind of have the same policy of for Slightly Reckless that we do with Half Cut the video company, and that's like if someone, whatever someone charges, I'm not going to be like, oh, can you do it for this much? Or if that's your price, that's your price, and we'll do everything we can. If it's out of our price range, then, you know, we won't be able to use you. But if we can pay it, we will. And I used all my savings to pay artists and stuff before we launched the Kickstarter, so it's kind of good that it went well. But then, like as I say, when we got into the design phase, we went through the kind of written content. I had the kind of playtest materials that were just all words with some little bits of artwork. We went through it page by page and was like, what does this spread look like? What does this spread look like? This artwork can go here, this can do here, and then I just kind of left Dom to it, and we see each other every day anyway. So he'd be like, "I've just done this spread, look at this," and but when it got to the printing stage, that was where it was kind of like that was a new beast to tame. Just a lot of back and forth of like we'd done stuff for print before, and Dom's made like menus in the past and done other design stuff, posters and like that. But printing a book's like a whole new kettle of fish in it. So there was a lot of back and forth. But I was sick of hearing the word trap, and I was like, I don't know what this is, and then they're explaining it, and so there was a lot of back and forth on the printing, which won't happen with Berserkr now because I know what it is. We both know how it works and that kind of stuff. And then in terms of fulfillment, that was kind of we partnered with a couple of different people, and that was difficult. But the stuff's gone out, and it's just arrived in America and Canada, so it should be going out to America and Canada either, if not this week, next week. So it was a lot longer than I thought, and I think there was a lot of, I don't want to say mistakes, but when we launched the Kickstarter, I was using other Kickstarters as a barometer for timeline for how long it would be before we would deliver awards. And it wasn't until a few months down the line that those Kickstarters that ran kind of around a similar time were like, oh, there's a delay, oh, there's a delay, oh, there's a delay. And I was like, oh shit, like I've used these as a kind of guideline for our timeline, and then we had to delay stuff. But now going into this next one, I know the timeline now, and we have delivered kind of our pledges before. Some of those other Kickstarters that I used as a guideline still haven't delivered theirs, so we're kind of going into the next one with a lot more experience and knowledge, and the process isn't as kind of daunting and scary this time. And it was like, especially when we did the Kickstarter for Ronin, it was like Dom was like, oh, let's do tarot cards, and it was like, all right, yeah, that'll be cool. And then you have to kind of get to the point where it's like, well, who prints tarot cards? And you just go find someone. And it's kind of like just new information. But this time I'm like, right, I know we've got manufacturers, and I've made a lot of contacts, and I know how everything works now. So I can kind of just go into this one with the excitement rather than the kind of not worry, but kind of it's not the unknown, it's I know what's coming now. And I'm sure there'll be, kind of bumps along the road for Berserkr, but they won't be as large.
Sure, yeah. Well, you've done quite a few, like there's different scenarios and little expansions for Ronin. Do you think there's going to be more stuff for Ronin down the line?
Yeah. It was weird. I couldn't sleep last night actually because I was having ideas for it and stuff. But I don't mind talking about what we're going to do. We're going to have an expanded bestiary, so more monsters and yokai. We're going to expand to the Yomi demons, and I think I want to. It's difficult because when I was like running the game and we were playtesting and stuff, and it's great having a Discord community now because they'll be able to playtest Berserkr, and it won't just be a few different people that I found on Reddit. But like when I'm playing the game, I'm obviously running it with the kind of knowledge. I made the thing, so it's like I understand what I was trying to get across with the Yomi section of the game, but looking at the book, I haven't kind of given so much information that other people could kind of use those same things that I've been doing when we were playing and stuff. So I want to expand that a little bit and give some more Yomi demons and some alternative to kind of Yomi was always meant to be this kind of, they were based on some of the classes, and it was supposed to be matching whoever died to their kind of like similar class. And there was a session where I ran the gambler who went into Yomi, and I ran like kind of like a demonic casino kind of situation where they had to kind of, rather than fight to get back to the real world, they had to gamble and play a game to get back up. So I want to include more stuff like that. I also want to do a bunch of short stories kind of based in the world. Right in the kind of setting and world building was one of my favorite parts of the project. So I kind of want to do a little bit more of that, but kind of have things linked to it. So it might be, a story that features a new yokai and it'll have stat block, or it'll have kind of like a dungeon in there that'll kind of match up to the story and stuff. And then more weapons and kind of tables, and it should be like a meaty little expansion that I think should be coming. We're hoping to do either a Kickstarter or we'll just go straight to print later this year. But yeah, I'm not short of I'm actually going to Japan in October for 3 weeks, so I'm hoping I'll come back with a kind of mind full of
Yeah.
of inspiration.
Sure. And we've talked a little bit about the new Kickstarter as well. Do you want to sort of
Mm.
expand on that? What is that new game? What's the sort of pitch for it?
So it is similar in scope and scale to Ronin. It's built on the Mork Borg engine again, but it's for Norse mythology. I'd seen during a lot of research and stuff, I'd seen a lot of TTRPGs that focus on kind of Vikings and that kind of more grounded um, kind of elements of that Norse culture. So, but it was funny. I think a few years ago I was reading Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, and I know a lot of the stories are kind of from Poetic Edda and Prose Edda, but they seemed very in line with the kind of stuff we'd get up to in a TTRPG. Stealing someone's hair or like turning into a fly to mess up a blacksmith's work is, that's kind of like TTRPG 101 scenarios, and stuff goes wrong and you've got to kind of go and fix it, and you find a mad way to go and fix it. So I was like, yeah, let's kind of focus more on the mythology side of it, and where we have kind of classes based on the realms, and it was kind of a weird thing to handle because I wasn't sure whether to kind of do my own take on the nine realms and Norse mythology, or keep it more in line with actual Norse mythology. And I decided to keep it more in line with actual Norse mythology. But again, similar to Ronin, we've got new mechanics. So we've got like runes, runic magic. That's kind of expanding the text system in Ronin, that it can be used by any class, and they can be used as spells or as kind of inscribed onto your weapon or armor to give benefits, kind of similar, and each rune has a meaning that the kind of spell, the effects are based on. We've got a Ragnarok system, so Mork Borg's all about the end of the world coming. That's why you've got the calendar and Necrobell, and that's why we did the Black Calendar and Ronin. This time I wanted players to have a little bit more agency rather than you just roll the dice in the morning, and if it's a bad thing happens. I wanted kind of the player to have a tangible effect on whether they wanted to speed up the end of the world or kind of delay it. So that's kind of set amongst a war between Loki and Odin, that kind of, obviously Loki kind of wants to bring around Ragnarok and start afresh, whereas Odin's kind of trying to delay it. So you'll kind of have meetings and kind of contacts with certain gods that might ask you to do stuff, or might ask you to not do something for someone, and if you piss them off, you piss the wrong people off, you might be visited by a man with a hammer, I guess. We got like legendary weapons. We've got a Valhalla system. So the kind of way I approached Ronin and the way I've been approaching Berserkr is, I've always loved Hideo Kojima and the way he approaches video game design, where he gets to have fun with the player while not actually being there. He creates mechanics that kind of like a little bit more involved and a little bit more meta. So the Valhalla mechanic will have a timer where the player has to kind of talk about his saga, which is another mechanic I'll talk about in a sec. But they have to talk about like all the things that they've done throughout their story time and throughout their play sessions and stuff, and go, this is why I should get into Valhalla, and that'll kind of affect the roles and stuff. And the GM will judge them accordingly within that 3 minutes and say, right, you can go to Valhalla, or no, sorry, you've got to go to hell.
That's great.
Yeah. And then what was the mechanic I just mentioned that I said I was going to talk about
The
again?
sagas.
Sagas, yes. So sagas will be a big thing of it. Each kind of quest or thing, it could be as like simple as like beating someone up in a tavern, or or something as grand as killing a god. That's your kind of saga that you build, so that when your character does die or the end of the world happens, you can go, this is the story of my character, and it's built out, and that'll have mechanical effects within the game. So like people hear about the stories that you've kind of you've kind of created as your player, and they'll be like, oh, you're the guy who did that, or you're the guy who beat up that guy in the bar that time. But yeah, I'm trying to kind of cram as much Norse mythology kind of inspiration into the mechanics as possible.
Hmm. Yeah, it's great stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
some of those examples that you mentioned as well, like they sound like the kind of cantankerous fun that you're having at the table in your group, which is not combat focused, right?
Mm.
So, like messing around with people, stealing hair, turning it into a fly, whatever it might be. What can you like? How do you find that sort of tension in role-playing game design? Because I think a lot of the defaults for a lot of parties and games masters will be, let's turn it into a fight, right? Let's just have a
Mm.
big fight at the end. So how do
Yeah.
you influence that and try and make it less, let's just get the axes out, and more like, let's invent ways to solve these problems?
Being rules light helps a lot because you're kind of not bogged down. Like, combat is an important part of some TTRPGs anyway.
Mm.
Um, and certainly as it's placed. But I can, we've played loads of systems over the years, and D&D included, and sometimes combat becomes this drudge of, people can get stun locked, or it can just be a situation where people aren't rolling that well, and it's just like, right, you'll go roll, I miss, I miss, I miss, I miss, and you're breaking down that ruins the immersion for me.
Mm.
When a combat becomes too involved with the mechanics or the roles or whatever, it kind of slows stuff down. And the whole thing that we did with Ronin was I wanted to build mechanics that kind of encouraged combat, but in a way that was like fast-paced, cinematic, and easy enough to, like, it wasn't like a thing. Like, that's why we have the Yomi mechanic. It's like that tension comes from, like, you're always like, if you die, then there's a boss fight, and that could happen. The GM has no control over that. The players don't really have much control over that. It's like, if you could get hit and you die, and that's going to be a boss fight. So that kind of brings the tension, but the boss fight then becomes this kind of epic cinematic thing, and the lethality of the Mork Borg engine means, like, someone's going to die in like 3 or 4 rounds. So just try and make sure it's not you. And it's why when we made the dueling mechanics for Ronin, I didn't want that to be too. I wanted it to be reflective of an actual samurai duel, not this kind of like long drawn out battle. It's like, you can die on the first hit in a duel, and that's what the kind of mechanics reflect that. So yeah, I like combat as its place, and I say that with our next project, and I don't think I'll have much, if any, combat in it. But it's certainly, I didn't want either of the games to be bogged down with like too much kind of involvement. I wanted it to be, fast-paced, cinematic, like I said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that definitely makes sense. I mean, there'll be some people, I'm sure, who would argue that, well, actually the rules and making it sort of a rules heavier game design gives you scaffolding around which to build like random chance, and that's what life is like.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you like is there anything that you sort of would say to those players, or like to try and get them to explore a slightly different approach at all?
Um, there is, like, from my point of view, there's a time and a place for that.
Hmm.
And I'm a big fan of crunchy rules that I can bend and kind of, having a lot of options. But I remember playing Starfield once, and you needed a flowchart just to like grapple someone. And I was like, that's well and good, but it's not kind of what I wanted for Ronin or Berserkr. Like I say, the projects we've got coming down the line will have, there's a lot more of that, and there's kind of like inventory management, but not done in a way like approached from a sense of like nothing should get in the way of the kind of the game itself and the story that people are telling. So yeah, I think there's enough kind of the reason we added the parry mechanic to Ronin, built on top of Mork Borg, was that I felt combat was a little bit too one dimensional. I felt like it needed a kind of another option to be added, and certain classes had features that can kind of do stuff more in terms of like crowd control and maneuverability, and adding things without going too far with it. You know what I mean? They're kind of
Right.
class specific, or rather than having a rule for like grappling or drowning or stuff like that, they're kind of class specific, so that it does give a bit of variation to combat and there is that kind of depth, but it's just more class based than kind of in the rules themselves. So yeah, like I don't know. I would say
Sure.
to those people, like, give Ronin a go and then send me an email if you rate it.
Sure. The impact of Mork Borg over the last few years seems to have been like massive. You know, it came along and it really
Undeniable, yeah.
is because it is such a unique, or what was quite a unique sort of approach to role playing game, like in terms
Yeah.
of the physical design, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you think that there is something like, have you seen what might be the next version of that? Are you designing the next thing that might be that, or do you think it's sort of still out there waiting to come, whatever comes next?
It's a difficult
It's a
difficult topic.
Question, yeah.
No, it's completely fair. I think I'll start with the Mork Borg thing. So Mork Borg for me has done so much for the TTRPG scene. I think it's like it's not just given us a platform like to make stuff and like go down this kind of route of making TTRPGs, but it's kind of like there's people in our Discord who like never made stuff for a game before, and then they've found and played Ronin and decided to make stuff, and that to me is like that's one of the best things about doing this, is seeing other people make stuff. But that kind of knock-on effect that Mork Borg's had in creating like hacks of it, and then people are making stuff for the hacks, and then people are making stuff for the hacks of the hacks, and that kind of like ripple effect that's gone out with Mork Borg is like it's undeniable. I think it's great for the space. Getting people to kind of I think the design aspect, and not to say I think some people take the kind of layout and design of Mork Borg as like, oh, you can just do it messy, but like they know what they're doing over there. It's not like you can't just throw shit together and go, oh, it's like Mork Borg because it's messy, because it does look shit. There are kind of rules you have to follow, and you have to know those rules before you can start breaking them. But the fact that it's got people making stuff is big for me. In terms of what the next thing is, I hope it's the thing that we're working on, to be honest with you. I've been working on it for about, I can't say too much because I've only told about 4 people, but I've been working on it for about 3 or 4 years, and the game itself will be kind of a standalone thing, and it'll have a supplement and stuff like that. But we're looking to incorporate things that I haven't seen done in a TTRPG, and I don't know if that's because the people who make in the TTRPG space are just kind of like coming from that space of like, the way it has been since the 80s, or it's still the same people, or those the way the indie scene's going now, there's a lot more new stuff and fresh stuff, but I haven't seen it implemented in any game that I've ever seen, and hopefully people can kind of get behind it when we're ready to kind of start telling people about it.
It sounds intriguing. Yeah, I'm excited to see what that might entail.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the sort of the next thing that's on the pad then? Is that what comes after Berserkr?
Well, obviously, as I mentioned, we've got the Ronin supplement. There'll be kind of expansions and supplements for Berserkr. They're kind of, the way I look at Berserkr and Ronin, they're kind of like the foundations for slightly reckless games that we can build on. Because a few people asked me at the Games Expo and in the Discord, they were like, "Oh, are you done with Ronin then?" It's like, no. We just want kind of, I need a little bit of variety. Otherwise, things get stale. I think if I went straight into Ronin supplements, I might get burnt out. And there's only so much samurai stuff I can kind of look at for the the last year or so. So switching it up and then moving back and forth seemed like the best way to go for us. But when that project will be ready to show or talk about or come, I'm not sure. It's kind of like I'm not trying to rush it out. I've kind of built the world, and I've spoke to the right people about kind of building the infrastructure for what we want to do, and that's been eye-opening because I'm not into the kind of technical and code side of it that we need. But yeah, I mean, I'm always having ideas for TTRPGs and stuff, and Dom will come around to do some work and some design stuff, and I'll be like, oh, I had this idea for this, or I had this idea for that, and some of like, I'd probably say like 80% of them are a bit shit, but every now and then. Every now and then he'll go, "No, that one sounds good," and I'll be like, "All right, yeah, I'll kind of put that to one side and write on it." So I'm always kind of like working on different stuff at the same time to keep it fresh and
Mm,
build stuff, and eventually, like it might not be the next kind of mainline TTRPG we release, but
mm.
I think it will be. I hope it will be. I'd probably say it's like 40%, 50% done at this point.
Okay, that's fun. Yeah, something to look forward to then. I
Mm.
mean, the you mentioned the sort of the open license, Mork Borg. Obviously, people can create games like yourselves, and
Yeah.
then Ronin sort of follows that spirit as well. Would you, having done it, having created your own game, created your own company to make new games, would you sort of recommend it to people? Is it something that's worth pursuing, do you think?
Um, that's a difficult question because there's been times over the last 2 years where like I already run another business, so I guess like if you don't run, I wouldn't recommend running two businesses. It's quite a lot. Um, but in terms of like if you've got the free time and like someone someone commented on a Reddit post we did yesterday actually, and they were like looking at Berserkr like makes me want to not make the thing I'm making because it's not that good. Like it doesn't look as good as yours. And I was like, listen, don't do that. Like work on your thing. I was like, message me if you need to. I'll help wherever I can. Um, I would recommend it though, because if you're someone who kind of like works on a lot of homebrew stuff, that kind of stuff, or like even if you've just got like an idea for it might even be like a one-page TTRPG. I think just getting in the habit of making stuff, regardless of like whether you want to do a Kickstarter or you want to sell it, or even if it's just like a free thing that you throw an itch, I think the habit of making stuff can snowball to the fact where you will get to the point where you can do a Kickstarter or start selling it or come to the Games Expo or whatever. Um, but yeah, I would recommend it. Just don't do what I did and like I come from a background of like deadlines and like you have to do it by this point. So I was setting deadlines for myself and like working morning till evening and like stressing myself out like I need to get it done. But then no one. This was before like we'd even announced the Kickstarter as well. Like nobody was like sat there going, "Where's my book?" Like nobody even knew the book existed, and I'm like, need to meet this deadline. So I think like yeah, maybe approach it with a little bit more of a relaxed mindset than I did. But yeah, I would certainly recommend it. Like I'm always creating stuff. I'm like if I'm not drawing, I'm writing or making videos or so it's not just kind of TTRPGs that I like to make, but I think if you're a creative person, then TTRPGs allow you to kind of explore all that kind of side of stuff. That's why I like TTRPGs because I can imagine this idea for like something weird and random, and I go, right, what would that look like as a TTRPG? What would the mechanics look like? And you're kind of not um, kind of handcuffed by the medium you use, and TTRPGs allow for a lot of creative expression and imagination, and that's why I like them.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I've got one final question, I suppose, which I ought to have asked
Yeah,
before. Well, you
that's all right.
mentioned, you love the Kurosawa, lots of classic movies and stuff like that. Do you have a favorite? Like what one that
I
speaks to you
couldn't,
the most, and which
I
is
could,
probably
I couldn't pick a favorite Kurosawa
no.
film because, man, he was like, I saw a thing the other day that was saying like he was, I think he was legally blind by the time he was making his last films,
Right.
and it, I know that most of them are in black and white, but to me, like some of those black and white films have more color than color films, and I do a lot of work with color in video, so kind of seeing that stuff. But in terms of like a favorite, um. Favorite movie? It's like Samurai Wise.
Yeah, yeah. So one that sort of has maybe or maybe not favorite, but has spoken to you the most in your creation of Ronin.
Um, not you know what kind of Yojimbo had a big effect, both for one of the classes, the Wild Dancer, and the solo rules. So like solo rules was something that people were asking about when I started posting spreads. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna do solo rules?" I hadn't really like delved or dipped me toe into solo rules, and it ended up being like one of my favorite things that we made for Ronin. Like it just kind of hit that lone samurai on the road, walks into town, there's stuff going on. It just hit that kind of fantasy like nail on the head. I remember saying to Dom when we were kind of putting it together and I'd written stuff for it and we were doing the layout and that, I was like, this is fucking, I was like, playing this, it's fucking boss, you know? I was like, I think I might prefer it to playing with people because it's just me and I don't have to deal with other people's bullshit. But yeah, like Yojimbo certainly spoke on that. But I mean, there's touch points from all the kind of films and books and games that I played. Ghost of Tsushima, the horse name that I picked was Kagi, which means shimmer, which is what the island ended up being called. Sorry, Kagi means shadow, and Island of Shadows. Kagi no Shima was Island of Shadows. So yeah, there's kind of like touch points everywhere. But yeah, Yojimbo stands out.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, it's a fantastic game. Ronin, absolutely awesome.
Thank you very much.
Really, really fun. I'm looking forward to Berserkr. I mean, do you have a date for when that's going live? Is that live now or coming up?
Not a concrete date. There's a pre-launch page you can follow. I don't know when you'll be putting this out. Maybe it's live right now. If it is, go buy it. It'll be a couple of weeks from now, so second week of July, I think.
Right.
It depends on everything's kind of good and ready to go. We're working on a video that I'd like to be done because, you know, last time for the Ronin stuff, it was like, this is the date and everything has to be done by this date. And we were doing loads of stuff last minute and it was like, no, I'm not doing that again. We'll get the stuff done and then we'll launch rather than rushing everything. But yeah, it'll probably be second week of July. And yeah.
Fantastic. Great. Definitely one to look out for. Well, Sacha, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed
Thanks, Jordan.
this.
Thanks for having me on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sacha, so much for joining me to talk about your experiences creating a brand new game and publishing company. If you would love to find out more information about Ronin or Berserkr, then I've included a link to the Slightly Reckless Games website down below. And there's also a link to the brand new Kickstarter for Berserkr, which hopefully goes live very soon. If you have a suggestion for other games designers or publishers who you think I should seek out for a conversation, whether that's an indie developer or someone from Dungeons & Dragons or Games Workshop or another big franchise, then please leave a comment below and drop me some names. I would love to chat with more people from across this incredible hobby, from every type of game, every type of publisher, and at every level of the industry. If you would like to support me, then you can check out my Patreon down below, and you should also know that these interviews can be listened to as a podcast. So just go to your favorite podcast app and search for In Conversation with Jordan Sorcery. Thank you once again to Sacha. Thank you for watching. I'm Jordan, and this is Jordan Sorcery.